Hello. This Sunday, we conclude the Epiphany season, as always with the story of the Transfiguration. And although Lent does not begin until Wednesday, remember that we're getting a head start on Lent by beginning our Sunday morning Lenten series this Sunday at 9:30 in the multipurpose room. The Transfiguration is a very strange passage indeed. One that just doesn't quite seem to fit somehow in the gospel story. There is Jesus in the midst of his busy ministry, teaching and healing, and suddenly he's up there on the mountain, and this strange scene unfolds with his face and his clothes shining like the sun, and these figures from ancient history, Moses and Elijah appearing. And the disciples, Peter, James, and John, are overwhelmed and terrified. And then, just as suddenly, it's all over and they're back down the mountain in the midst of human life. And of course, the mystery is compounded because the story seems to have clear links with other passages of Scripture. For example, the story of Moses' encounter with God on Mount Sinai when he received God's law. And it's also been suggested that, as well as looking back all those years to Moses, the story also points forward, not very far forwards, in fact, to the story of Jesus' death on the cross at a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. Only when we compare the two stories, we're struck more by the contrasts than the similarities. Think for a moment. Here in this story of the Transfiguration, Jesus' clothes shine with the glory of God. There, at the crucifixion, soldiers gambled for Jesus' clothes. Here in this story, Jesus is surrounded by two great heroes from ancient history. There on the cross, Jesus is surrounded by two common criminals. Here at the Transfiguration, Jesus is witnessed by three male disciples, Peter, James, and John. There at Golgotha, three women followers are named as witnesses. Again, this scene of Transfiguration is a scene of dazzling light, while at the crucifixion, darkness came over the whole land. Here in this scene, Jesus basks in God's presence. There he suffers the anguish of God's absence. Here on the mountain, God confesses Jesus as God's Son, as a voice sounds forth, "This is my Son, my chosen." There, in utter abandonment, it's left to a Roman centurion to blurt out, "Truly this man was innocent." It seems almost as if the horrible scene on Golgotha mocks this moment of glory on the mountain. It's as if the horror of that account seems almost to be a deliberate reversal of the splendor of what happened here. And if so, then what would that tell us? Well, maybe we could think of it this way. At this point in the gospel, Jesus is on a journey that will take him to Jerusalem and to death and beyond, to Easter. Just a few verses before our passage, Jesus has spoken candidly about the death that awaits him, and what this Transfiguration story is doing is showing us the end of the journey. It gives us a preview of Jesus' destination. Here the disciples are getting a preview of something that's yet to come. And only when they witness that will they be able to make sense of what they've experienced here on the mountaintop. The cross, the crucifixion, Golgotha is one stop on the way, but it's not the end of the journey. We're not left, thank God, with Christ disfigured and abandoned and bloody, pinned and hung on a tree. Beyond that is the risen Christ, who can only be glimpsed here. But of course, and this is the important point, what we see revealed here is not just the goal of Christ's journey, but the goal of our journey too. Christ came to transform us. He came to transfigure us with the light of God's grace. And the cross may be part of our journey just as it was part of Christ's journey, but because of Christ, it's not the end of our journey. Here we glimpse our destination. But of course, down the mountain, we too must go. And of course, this world at the foot of the mountain is the one we're all too familiar with. It's a world where lives are preyed on by evil forces, It's a world where humanity is denied. And when we look around us, we see life lived at the foot of the mountain rather than at the top. We see lives lived much closer to Golgotha than to the mountaintop. And what are we to do about our world? What are we as Christians to do? Well, I would suggest that as a starting point, we need a vision of what we've been created to be, a vision of transfiguration. We need a vision of the mountaintop, for it's there and not at the foot of the mountain or on Golgotha that our journey as human beings ends. Such visions can motivate us and guide us to be the people who can offer hope to the world. All around us, we see visions of poverty and of homelessness, visions of Golgotha, and we say, no, this is not what we've been created to be. Christ came to heal the world and raise it from this. Like Peter and James and John, we've been granted a different vision, and that's the first step in transfiguring the world and leading it to its goal in God. See you soon.